4 defence works here.
We've got a huge investment, 300 or 400 million pounds worth of investment on the cliff top, compared to at Mappleton, where we had, say, 100 houses. I would say that at Easington, it's perfectly easy to come to the conclusion that sea defences must be cost-effective. 4 or 5 million pounds on the coast protection works for there seems pretty small beer compared to the value of what is being protected. At Easington, you get into an even more sensitive part of the area. You're getting right to the very end of our coastline, and that's where Spurn is situated, where we've got a heritage coast. We've got a site of special scientific interest in the lagoons, and we've decided to do an environmental assessment there, because if there were a temporary starvation of sand, then a very vulnerable area is the lagoons.
Are there any dew touch on the south side?
Not yet, no, not for a few days.
So 4 birds got up from that, you know, between that metal and that other nest. There seem to be 4 birds to get up from there.
Number 10 and number 11 together. Well, quite close together. It's number 10 which you've rung.
Beacon lagoons just to the south of the terminal are important to environmentalists. Spurn is a site of special scientific interest, and these birds, the rare and protected little terns, are especially treasured.
If you need any chicks.
Just watching this one here, she looks as if she's looking for chicks, the way she's hovering.
Young birds are vulnerable to predators and egg collectors. An electric fence keeps out foxes and a trap deals with hungry crows. But there's nothing to stop attacks by the even rarer and equally protected merlins. These birds of prey have arrived at Spurn early in recent years, and last year took all the chicks.
We'll put colouring on it first. That denotes that it's been ringed somewhere round about the humber. And then with it being on the left leg, it means it's been ringed as a nestling. If it was on the right leg, it would mean it was ringed as an adult. And a BTO ring on the other leg, which identifies it as an individual bird if it's ever found anywhere else. All right, be quiet. Now, this sounds an awful crunchy noise when you do this up. It's because the... Oops. When we do it up. See if we can manage to get the pliers around it. It's just where the ring's sliding around in the pliers making that crunching noise. You can hide under there again. And we'll move over and do the next one.
This is how these birds are monitored to see whether they return to the same sites to breed each year. Through telescopes and binoculars, identifying rings can be seen on adult birds in the breeding colonies.
Right, you little monkey, come here. Here we are. The other one can't be far away. All right, you hide under there.
If Spurn Head is washed away, it will take with it a rich and varied history of war and peace. This is Spurn in the 1920s. Last time it was breached in 1849, it was fortified by the army. During the First World War, they built a railway along it to serve the battery at the point. Between the wars, this railway was a lifeline. the residents of Spurn adapted a variety of vehicles to get to and from the mainland to the north. When war came again, the army was ready. Within months, a garrison of 200 men was stationed at the point, equipped with all the latest military hardware.
The crew of the twin six-pounder would have been up to 20 personnel to operate it in shifts. 10 of the personnel would be on the actual mounting themselves, which is here. The others would be round the back, pushing the trolleys round as the gun traversed. Other personnel would be behind with ammunition. These would replenish the trolleys as they were fired, and then they too, in turn, would be replenished from the magazines below. So it was quite an involved operation. They would have slept in barracks away from the back, but during their watch session, they would be sheltered inside there. But as soon as the alarm sounded, they could be on the gun mounting in a matter of seconds and ready for action. Although looking around you, it just looks like heaps of concrete, they all do have a history. Just as much as any Norman castle or grand palace, there is a history there. And we just try to make people aware of their significance.
Well, it looks like a lost cause here.
I'm afraid so. We've arrived a little too late for this. But even so, what is left is still significant. If it can be interpreted properly, let people know what's there, I'm sure they'd appreciate that.
When the army finally shut the door on Spurn in 1956, it was left to defend itself against the sea, sitting vulnerable to the next high spring tides. It remains a mecca for lovers of the sea, the wildlife, and even the mud of the Humber Bight. When Spurn is breached, it is believed that these mudflats will protect the vital Humber shipping lanes from the encroaching sea.
What we've got here, this is Spurn Bight is what this section is known as. It's part of the Humber Flats and Marshes Triple SI.
It's part of what?
Humber Flats and Marshes Triple SI. It's a site of special scientific interest.
Why?
It's particularly important, mainly because it's so abundant or prolific as a salt marsh. It's got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of creatures sort of beneath the surface. You look out, there's vast expanse of nothingness apparently to the naked eye, and you think, well, there's nothing out there at all. If you go out there like we're doing today and look down beneath the surface, you find amazing densities of different shells, creatures and worms, things like little tiny hydrobia, which you get densities between 30 and 40,000 per square metre, which is an awful lot of shells by anybody's standards. Estuaries in Britain, they're all important, and a lot of them are also important internationally, and that includes the Humber estuary.
Why?
This is particularly important because of the numbers of wintering wildfowl that come here, and also the numbers of waders that pass through. Large numbers of birds that have been breeding in the high Arctic, migrating south to Africa, because obviously it's such a long way, they can't fly all that way one go, they need food, and the estuaries around the British Isles provide those fueling points for them to feed.
In late autumn they arrive. Shell ducks, oyster catchers, knot and dunlin. They signal the onset of winter, when Spurn moves once again into its season of maximum vulnerability.
I think we're waiting for all the factors to come together that bring trouble for Spurn. That's low pressure over the North Sea. It's a high tide, and it's a northeasterly gale. If we get all of those three factors running together, then I think it's pretty certain that the neck of Spurn, the very narrow, very low-lying part of Spurn, would be washed across. What would result the following morning, I don't know, and no one can tell you what will be left. There may be a huge hole, a huge chasm that can't be bridged, or there may be just a narrow causeway. The road that goes down Spurn is not a public road. But that's not to say that the local authorities would necessarily wash their hands of it, but I've got to make it clear that it would be a private problem, as all coast erosion is a private problem. What we now have to do is to go forward and talk about ways of meeting the emergencies that may arise. It's very difficult to know what exactly we'll be left with after the high tide that comes and does the damage. But we're going to have to develop some strategies for the future, because there are people living there that we have a duty to try to protect them, if not to make life completely convenient for them.
During the winter, the community on Spurn battens down the hatches. The lifeboat men stand ready, and the Humber pilots carry on their endless tasks. The Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, the owners of Spurn, are part of the Spurn Heritage Coast Management Group, which includes the Holderness Borough Council. They've decided that hard sea defences are no longer the answer to Spurn's problems. They hope that a sand and shingle ridge will form, rolling slowly landwards with the tide. The road will be lost. Spurn Head itself will move westward to keep pace with the erosion of the Holderness coast, but it depends on its supply of sand. Nobody really knows what effect the new sea defences of the gas terminal will have. If nature is left to take its course, it just might mean the end of Spurn Head.
They're trying to clean the world up, make it look better than it already is.
Don't much if that's so